Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude, and I'm here to tell you about an awesome way for you to rub elbows with your favorite podcast hosts here on the Sports History Network, while at the same time rooting for your hometown team this upcoming NFL season. You've been hearing all about our partner, Tailgate Fantasy, the past few weeks. Well, dig on this. Tailgate created a special Sports History Network league for our listeners, so we can put the word fan back into fantasy football together. It's free to join, and if you do so before the season kicks off, you'll automatically be entered into a drawing for a free t-shirt from one of our other partners, Home Field Apparel. It's a win-win-win! So hurry up today and head to sportshistorynetwork.com/tailgate for all the details. Again, that's sportshistorynetwork.com/tailgate.
The intricacies of the football rules revisions over the years are quite an interesting study. None is better than looking at the football field itself. Timothy P. Brown joins us today to talk about the work of his friend James L. Gilbert and his evolution of the football field in great detail. We talk about this and more coming up in just a moment.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history on a day-to-day basis. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the gridiron, one day at a time. So as we come out of the tunnel of the Sports History Network, let's take the field and go no huddle through the portal of positive gridiron history with pigskindispatch.com.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of pigskindispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your portal to positive football history. And wow, we have a great episode coming on tonight. We have Timothy P. Brown of Football Archaeology joining us, and we're going to be talking about the football field and some evolutionary changes that have happened to it over the years. Tim, welcome back to the Pig Pen.
Darren, good to see you again, as always. Thanks for having me. Never want to take it for granted that you're going to let me come on your show.
Invitation is always there, my friend, and I'm never going to take it for granted that you join us each week, because it's quite a treat for myself and the listeners. We get to learn about something new of football, or reminded of something maybe that's been long forgotten, and I think that's kind of typical of what we have tonight. Something that we see every single game that we watch, and it's so obvious that we probably take it for granted, and that's the football field itself. Without it, there's not much of a game going on. And you came across a friend of yours that you guys wrote a piece together a few years ago on the evolution of the football field, and really quite interesting. And maybe you could talk about that a little bit tonight.
Yeah. So this is the friend that you're mentioning is James Gilbert, and kind of longtime readers, or somebody who's gone back through the archives, might remember that back in November 2021, he and I co-authored a story about the University of North Carolina team from 1893, and they were the first Southern team to go to the North and play a game, because they played Lehigh towards the end of the season up in Manhattan. So, he and I kind of worked together on that, and I forget even now, how he and I first connected, but he's in the kind of old football and just general sports, arcane information, like me, and I had, like in my how football became football, I documented at least the major sequences of how the field changed and how the field markings changed, goalpost locations, all that kind of stuff. So, I took it to a certain level, and but James recently launched a Substack newsletter or blog called James's Newsletter, and one of his first articles is an article about the evolution of college football field. So basically, what he did, and he's been doing this for quite some time. He's been creating graphics, images of the football field and all the markings at each point in time. So going back to 1876 And then, each time that it changed, either the dimensions or the markings, the location, this or that on the field, he basically created all these graphics to show this information. And then what he's done now is to mirror it in a Substack article. So he's got kind of the description of what was happening. Why did it change? What was happening in the game that led to the change? And then just the detailed description of the change. And like when I did mine, I stopped at 1960, but he carried on to the present. So all the different changes that, we sometimes don't think about, but things like the size of the coach's box, the size of the team's box, how far off the sideline the get back, the get back coach has to get back, all that kind of stuff. He's outlined, or not outlined, he put in detail all this information. So this is one of these where, normally we talk about my tidbits or an article, but this, I just wanted to make sure there's some attention brought to him and the effort he's gone through. Because it's just, it's a great resource. And I don't know anybody who has documented how the field has changed over, 147 years of football history like he has. So it's just a really neat effort. And he's got a couple of other things that he's done as well.
Yeah, that's I know exactly what you're talking about. I did a piece, similar to you, where I covered football field probably 2 or 3 years ago. Actually, it was an adaptation of an article I wrote back in 2003, and I had my son, throw some graphics up there, and we, it's James's article. I had the grid field in the early 1900s, but I had it going, goal line to goal line, which it did. But I had forgotten about the aspect of back in, I believe it was 1903. And we were just talking about, I ran across an article the other day in newspapers.com where it went 25-yard line to 25-yard line with the grid. And then it was the normal stripes, outside the 25s or to the goal line. Anyway.
Yeah.
So just the detail he's doing that. And I can tell you from officiating, the 27 years I officiated at the high school level, there was a field change every single year. Like you said, the coach's box changing by a yard, or your teams were allowed to the 20s and it was the 25s, or boundary lines, or a hash mark is now, instead of 3 inches, it's 4 inches wide, or whatever. So I can imagine with the collegiate field has been doing over those years, it's probably every year there's something small. So this is really a Galothian chore that James is doing, and it's much appreciated. Yeah. And we'll have a link here in the show notes, folks, that you can get to James's site as well as on Pigskin Dispatch, so you can appreciate his work. That's really going to take a lot of effort on his part, and that's really appreciated.
Yeah, the thing about it is, like, there's there's a bunch of times when, you and I go on a particular site that sometimes they post these unidentified, people can't figure out where's this, who's this team in this picture? Here's a game in a stadium. Where is this? Who's playing? What's the time period? And so a lot of times you can tell certain things just based on the uniforms or the formations. You have a pretty good sense of what's going on. But there's other times where, if depending on the angle of the shot, you can see the field markings, and that tells you a tremendous amount. In some cases, like 1903, it tells you exactly what year the game was played. Mm-hmm. If you have the right kind of angle or the right kind of shot. So anyways, it's just anybody who enjoys doing that kind of thing, or sometimes finds themselves looking back at an old photo and trying to figure out, well, when was this thing from? His site will be really a great reference, because it just collects all that kind of information in one place. The other thing that another thing that he does that is interesting is, and some of his posts on his newsletter reflect this, where he's a North Carolina UNC graduate and fan. And so one of the things he's done is he's gone back and he's tried to figure out where every North Carolina football game was played. And I don't mean that at the very casual level. I mean at a detailed level. And so, like you can go back and there's all kinds of sites where there's a site called jhowl.net that I use all the time to find the old scores and where games were played and that kind of stuff. And so it might say the game was played in Milwaukee or it was played in New Haven or wherever it was, but it doesn't tell you necessarily the field. Well, a lot of the old football, especially going further back, in the 1800s, maybe up till 1920, sometimes these games were just played in some local park, and they slapped up temporary stands, or the games were played in a minor league baseball park that got torn down 80 years ago. And now there's, an expressway is sitting on top of it, or, a shopping mall or whatever it is. There's all kinds of these past stadiums that just are no longer there. And in a bunch of cases, kind of people have lost track of where they are. So he goes in, and I don't really understand all the resources that he uses, but I know he uses like there's a bunch of online through like the Library of Congress or something. There's these online insurance maps that used to document, the streets and major cities and all that kind of stuff and which buildings were where. And so I think he uses those kinds of things and all kinds of stuff from, the newspapers telling you, well, it's at the intersection of 42nd and Western or wherever. And so then he finds where this game or where this field was and then plots the field atop, what it looks like today, like in a Google Maps
No
kind
kidding.
of thing.
Wow.
So
that is cool.
Yeah, it's just really kind of fun. And then he's created some databases that, dig into other information. It's very UNC specific. So I myself, I don't care necessarily about UNC, but I just really appreciate, his digging into just, it's just digs into the details of a particular topic.
But just think about all the fields that it covers. Everybody that UNC traveled to play over the years. You're going to know where their stadium is. You're going to know where Duke played their games when they were, Trinity College or whatever, at the time. Yeah. So that's some really interesting stuff. I'll have to add that to my bookmarks and check that out because you have like the uniform sites, the Gridiron Uniform database, and you have the helmets, sites that you can go to and see where helmets are from here. Now that having a resource to look at fields of an era and where football stadiums were, that's pretty cool too. So that's I'm sure a lot of people will be interested in having that information too. So good job, James.
Yeah, no, it's kind of fun stuff, and just the again, like I said, I don't know the method that he uses to get there, but and unfortunately he couldn't join us tonight. Otherwise, he would have done so. But so anyway, it's interesting stuff, and if you're enough of a geek like you and I are, you can really it's like you see somebody who's got an interest in this sport or this aspect of the sport, and they dig into it, or they collect certain things. It's just one of those things. Nothing I had thought of, but just really kind of deep devotion to a particular aspect of the game.
Yeah, well, let's use a little bit of James's information. Okay, now you just recently saw this and appreciated it. What's something that jumped out at you to either you didn't realize or maybe you forgot and it brought a different light on it that James did in his field work?
Yeah, I think I don't know that for me it's any one thing. I know he just did an article, I think maybe it was today's or the other day, where he's pointing out that like North Carolina's going to play a game in Charlotte. I think they're playing at the Panthers Stadium, and so the article's about, hey, they played, it's the 8th most frequent city that they played in. Wow. But for them, it's kind of like, they played at a lot of these intermediate cities. So I mean, teams used to do that all the time. And I've got an article. It's my Saturday tidbit is about this, where teams traveling. We've got this big thing about the West Coast athletes are going to be traveling to get to the Big Ten schools and all that kind of stuff. With all the conference modifications. But back in the day, when people are traveling by train, they spent a lot of time on the train too. And so a lot of times they'd find these cities halfway between one another, and both teams would meet there, and it'd be a bigger city, especially if they were kind of or rural schools. So they played in all kinds of locations, and so, but North Carolina in particular just seems like they played in a lot of places, a lot of different intermediate towns. And maybe it's just the geography of where they were and the transportation network at the time, but yeah, it's just kind of interesting, all the different places that they played.
Oh, very cool. All right. Well, why don't you go ahead and if you have James's information, if you want to call it out now, so people can do it. But again, if you're driving or something, you can go to the show notes and get the link there. But Tim, go ahead and let us know where we can find James.
Yeah. So, like I said, he's on Substack, which is just a platform. So you can find him at jamesleegilbert.substack.com. And, I checked beforehand, I Googled, just James Lee Gilbert Substack. And, it's it's the first thing that comes up. So, and then you'll have the link, the actual link in the show notes. So, but James Lee Gilbert Substack, and that should get you there.
All right. And folks, the graphics are really splendid. You're going to be really pleased, I think, when you see these graphics, especially of the football field evolution that we started talking off about. I got to go and check out all these the coordinates of where the fields were. I got to go appreciate that here when we get done. So I can't wait to do that. You just added another thing to my to-do list tonight.
Yes.
So thanks, James. Which is good.
Yeah. So far, he doesn't have a lot of those on this site, but he's done a bunch of them in the past. So I hope that he recycles them and republishes them on Substack.
Well, Tim, wow, that is great stuff. And thanks for bringing this to our attention so we can appreciate his work. And so we can appreciate your work. Why don't you let us know how folks can get your daily news?
Yep. Just go to footballarchaeology.com and, you can subscribe. You'll get an email every night at 7:00 Eastern with today's article. Otherwise, you can follow me on Twitter or Threads or on the Substack app.
All right. Timothy P. Brown, footballarchaeology.com. We thank you once again for joining us, and we will talk to you again next week.
Very good. Thanks, Darren.
Peeking up at the clock, the time's running down. We're going to go into victory formation, take a knee, and let this baby run out. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you back tomorrow for the next podcast. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Gene Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com. Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I wanted to thank you for stopping by to listen to another episode here on the Sports History Network. Our podcasters are passionate about uncovering and sharing sports stories from yesteryear. And if you didn't know it already, we have over 30 shows across the network covering all sorts of sports history topics. In fact, here's a glimpse into one of our awesome podcasts here on the network.
Each week, the official Football Learning Academy podcast will take you deep into the history of pro football through interviews with players, coaches, or administrators in the NFL, as well as interviews with Pro Football Hall of Fame selectors, authors, and historians. You'll learn how the game evolved and important moments that shaped the sport into what it is today. And don't miss the Pro Football History Nugget of the Week. Listen to the official Football Learning Academy podcast on the Sports History Network.
How about that? I bet you're super hyped to go listen to that new podcast, right? Well, to learn about this show and all the other podcasts on the network, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com/podcast. Again, that's sportshistorynetwork.com/podcast. Head over there today to find your next favorite sports history podcast.